views expressed are those of hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of News Radio 1040 WHO.
We're going to have a very interesting morning. We're going to have experts from all kinds of different fields later, too. We may have some open line time, but the first hour, though, this is sort of a follow-up of a program we had earlier, a couple of weeks ago, and we got involved in evaluating a video dealing with the issue of geoengineering. What's geoengineering? The concern is that you have some folks out there trying to modify our weather and our climate, putting stuff into our atmosphere to change weather patterns, theoretically to keep the effects of, quote, global warming from happening. And the people who just want to change the way the Mother Nature gives us resources from the sky, mainly rain, and like to change that kind of stuff. And I was digging around in the video, and this is probably the central core right here.
Wherever you see the jet chemtrails go over, you're going to get aluminum, barium, strontium coming down on you.
Why would we not believe it's happening when what we see in the sky matches exactly the expressed goal of numerous geoengineering patents, about 160 or more? Why would we not believe this is happening when every element showing up in the rain tests are the primary elements named in those geoengineering patents? Why would we not believe this is happening when we have escalating levels in very short time frames, as short as 5 years? We see rain levels of aluminum, for example, escalating as much as 50,000%. California air quality studies do not show these metals migrating from China, and it's of recent origin. So, this bombardment of heavy metals that's raining down on us is coming from somewhere. Why would we not believe geoengineering is occurring when the weather patterns are so altered here in exactly the manner stated by geoengineers and reports on the consequences for geoengineering, which are diminished rainfall, which are increased ozone destruction? We have a massive ozone hole in the northern hemisphere now.
Should aluminum be in the soil in the rain? And yes, it should be in the soil. It's naturally there, always was there. And should it be in the rain? Well, absolutely not.
Well, that is the central core, I think. Dan Wigginton is one of the producers of the documentary that I was just playing some sound from. Former Bechtel Power Corporation employee, contractor now in California and in Arizona. He was recently featured, his residence was recently featured in the cover edition of one of these renewable energy magazines called Home Power. Has a 1,600-acre wildlife preserve in Northern California where he lives. He's a lead researcher for GeoengineeringWatch.org. Well, that was your voice, Dane, and state any more of the central premise of your concern.
Thanks for shining light on this subject again, Jan. And the concern is that nobody has the right to play God with the weather. Any such notion should be seen as the insanity it is. And again, we have a mountain of documents to show that these programs have existed since at least the late 40s. And these documents are from the government, such as NASA and other governmental agencies. So, we have quite a paper trail to verify the long history of these programs that have now grown into such a global effect on the weather that it's really disrupting all the climate natural systems.
I was watching your documentary a few minutes ago, and you looked at China, and you said the Chinese have been doing this and have been trying to change their weather patterns. They were doing so with such vigor that you assert in your video that they caused about $1 billion to their own economy. They either overdid it or screwed up.
Actually, not my assertion, Jen. If people look this up, they can look up Chinese scientists create artificial snowstorms, and this was covered on mainstream media. They were not secretive about this, and their openness with their Bureau of Weather Modification. But when they did $1 billion worth of damage to Beijing, which they openly admitted, and people can look this up online. Don't want anybody to believe what I say. They can see the stats and data around these weather modification events.
So did they quit?
No, it appears they haven't quit. They just simply quit publicizing. I mean, we see the same sorts of events happening, but they were very open about it up until that time. I mean, they were not trying to be covert, but that's why there is some stories on mainstream media about that. But people will find numerous articles from mainstream sources about their weather modification activities. Chinese scientists create artificial snowstorms, I know, is one of the main stories.
You imply that in the video there that the pollution or the aluminum stuff that we find in the rain is not caused by the Chinese. We're doing it to ourselves?
We have studies. For example, CARB, California Air Resources Board, has extensively studied the aerosols coming from China. And heavy metals are not amongst those aerosols, with the exception of mercury, which converts to a gaseous state. So heavy metals like aluminum and barium don't just float across oceans. Again, and these metals were not here before. We have very extensive USDA soil studies on the soil pHs throughout Northern California. I mean, I have huge manuals here from the USDA, and our soil pHs here, which were previously acidic in the 5.4, 5.5 range,
right,
are now up to 6.6, 6.8. This has happened in the last 10 years, Jan, so something very profound is going on. And the metals are here, they're in the rain, now they're in the soil, and we see the pH changes accordingly.
One last question here before we introduce our in-studio skeptic here in just a second. Are we talking about weather modification, simply just trying to make some clouds rain in a specific spot? Or are we talking about climate changes in climate management? Is there a difference in your mind?
There is a difference. To alter the weather, there are many small and published weather modification programs throughout the continental U.S. About 150 per year are openly published from counties and states. But geoengineering is more of a global climate modification process. And again, we have documents, one from NASA, which I sent you, Jan, by the way, this morning, so your readers can review that. We found it on the NASA archives, 80 pages long, from 1966, that openly states, as of 1966, the U.S. government had been involved in weather modification for a full 20 years prior, back to 1946. And this document also states that they had budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars, even in 1966. So I did send this to you for your readers to review, if you can post it on your site. I mean, this is a U.S. government document. So this is climate modification, which affects all the Earth's systems. And anybody that knows about the weather would understand, or any understanding of the weather, if you affect any part of the system, you affect the whole system. And indeed, we see weather that's completely off the rails. Most people have noticed it by now. And this is something that quite simply should not be hampered with, and they're doing it on a incredibly massive scale.
This is Dan Wigginton. He is a researcher, and he is one of the contributors to GeoengineeringWatch.org. What we'll do is we'll take a brief time out, and then I'll introduce you to Craig Bergman, who is into religion, politics, and culture. He's sort of an expert in all those things. He's helping produce an upcoming documentary called Agenda 21. We've talked with him before. Brief time out, back in a moment at 1040 WHO. Dane Wigginton is a fellow who monitors geoengineering. He thinks this is a serious deal, and we're paying a huge price for people yet unknown and faceless. We're trying to figure out exactly who. Tampering with the weather and, in essence, polluting our hemisphere in the process. Craig Bergman is here in the studio. As I introduced him previously, as an expert in religion, politics, and culture. Just ask him. And Agenda 21 is the think piece you guys are working on. You've been listening, and you've heard Dane Wigginton. What do you think about this?
Well, Jan, I thank you first for having me on your show. You know, when I was listening the other week, I just called in to pretty much say, come on, Jan, what are you doing? You're a credible Marconi-winning talk show host. You talk about all the issues in our culture that are right on the money. You have what's needed to advance the conservative cause, and now you're having this on there. And I just thought, somebody's got to come on there and say,
rescue me?
Yeah, really.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
this is an
save
intervention?
the movement. Yeah, this is an intervention.
All right. So what's your problem, though, with what Dane was saying?
Well, I want to cover a couple things first. First, geoengineering is a real theory. So what we have here, I better set the premise. There is a thing called rat poison. And rat poison is not poison. It's 99% good food with just a little bit of poison in it that will kill you. And that's what these kind of whack job theories are. And I'm just going to call them what they are. And this is one of them. This is not legitimate. There is no science behind it. It is a conjecture, and it's a far-fetched one when we walk through what I'll do later, simple math. But I want to start with, yes, geoengineering is a real theory. There are really people who believe this can be scientifically possible. They have spent millions of dollars on it, almost all of them on the environmental wacko left of the world. Because here's what it is. To believe in this theory, to believe that geoengineering is even possible, you have to accept the very foundation, the very premise, the very cornerstone of the leftist wacko environmental movement, that man, through his own efforts, is capable of radically altering our climate and our environment. If you believe that, then you better believe in global warming. You better send your money to Al Gore and send your money to this guy, because they're going to, be working together. If you reject that premise, if you think I'm skeptical of that premise, if you're not sure, then you're a rational, sane, objective conservative, and we can have a dialogue. But if you already believe that man can do that, if you believe, rolling down your window and running your air conditioner a little extra long, spraying some hairspray, using underarm deodorant, these kind of things are going to change the world, there's no hope. You're done. You might as well not even bother to call in. And so I would like to say that the most important thing, and you asked the question, Jan, you said, is geoengineering, climate control, and weather modification the same thing? He said, oh no, they're different. And I totally agree, they are completely different. And then he went on to use a dozen examples of weather modification that proves geoengineering. Okay, they are completely different. Think of the issue of immigration and think of the issue of border control. They are closely related, but they are not the same issue. We have problems with immigration that don't relate to border control at all. And we have border control issues that aren't immigration. The people sneaking across our border are not immigrants, they're criminals. And we have to use the right language on every debate that we get into, or we're not going to get anywhere. So I have three generic premises. I'll hit them real quick, and then we can take them apart. The first one is, no one is actually doing geoengineering. It is a theory. And it's a theory like people study quantum mechanics and time travel and cold fusion. Universities spend millions and millions of dollars studying all kinds of things that go nowhere. And this has gone nowhere. The second thing is, weather control has been around since the 1900s, since man invented an airplane and was able to fly up and actually look at clouds for the first time and not just see them from the ground as a primitive primate. He said, well, these are full of water vapor. I bet if we put some silver or particles in it, we could make them a little bit heavier, and instead of blowing over the top of us, they would fall and rain on us. And they do that. Sure, they invented snow in China. We put snow up on the mountains in Aspen when it doesn't snow up there. But as you look around at the larger weather patterns, he was just talking about the dry, dry, dry. Well, last year we were dry, dry, dry. This year we're wet, wet, wet. And you know what? I've been in Iowa my whole life, 48 years, and I can remember flood, 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 drought, 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 farm crisis, not farm crisis. It's called weather. We have the joke in Iowa where we say, if you don't like the weather in Iowa, what?
Wait 20 minutes.
It'll change.
Yeah.
So, that's why they've went to this thing called climate change, because they really are trying to blur the distinction between weather and climate, because they are pushing an agenda.
All right.
And so those are my points.
All right. Dane, you've been listening patiently. Go ahead.
First of all, I hear a lot of opinion, but I don't hear a lot of fact. When he refers to the wacko left being the only people who think you could modify the weather, let's add a few more to that category. How about DOD, Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, NASA, RAND Corporation, MIT, University of Arizona, University of Wisconsin, University of California, Science Administration, Colorado State University. I could go on and on and on. I don't want anybody to believe me. Again, the document I mailed you this morning, Jan, the full outline of the U.S. weather modification programs as of 1966, 80 pages long. I challenge people to look and examine this. And in one breath, I hear that we cannot modify the weather. In another breath, I hear that we are, in fact, modifying the weather. So it seems a contradiction to me there. And, again, we're not talking about theory. We're talking about fact, that these documents exist, these programs exist. We have film of Craig, of these KC-10s, KC-135s spraying at altitude. So I don't want anybody to believe me again. I challenge people to actually look at the data, look at the video, examine these documents, examine the corporations involved. So apparently, if you're right, and all these agencies, governmental agencies, huge universities, apparently all of them are confused that they can't affect the weather. And when you say the weather is perfectly normal and that it's raining where you're at, well, if somebody looks at the U.S. drought monitor, and people can look this up online, maybe it's nice and wet where you're at, Craig, but here we are in absolute all-time record drought, and that's exactly what we would expect when people meddle with the weather. You have deluge one place, drought in another. It throws the whole system out of balance. And now maybe you can explain to us, if you're familiar with geoengineering, Craig, and it seems like you think you are, can you tell us what SRM is? Can you answer that question? Do you know what SRM is?
Well, I'm not going to play the
well, no, you seem to be very familiar with all the science. Do you know what SAG is? SAI. These are very basic geoengineering terms. Solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. These terms are named by every major science organization on the planet. Every major government on the planet is all discussing these terms. So, again, you have a lot of opinion, Craig, but I don't see any fact to back it up. And you refer to the wacko left being behind all these projects, or you insinuate that I'm making money off this in some way. I've spent about $50K of my own money, never taken or accepted a penny of. I quite simply, when I see stats like Alzheimer's and autism going off the charts, we have tests that show clearly we are being buried under a mountain of toxic metal. That is beyond dispute. And we have tests from around the globe to back this up. We know it's not coming from China. We know it matches the geoengineering patents exactly. We know we have global dimming, another important term that people should look up.
Hang on, Dane, because that's goes to a chunk of sound I did capture this morning. I thought it was kind of interesting. I'd like a comment from both of you on this.
There are simply too many dots here that connect. Our skies are almost never blue anymore. That is a named consequence of geoengineering. The amount of lost sunshine hitting the planet right now is beyond belief. If people look up the term global dimming, they will see that fully 20% of the sun's rays that reached the planet several decades ago are no longer reaching the planet. I mean, that's a profound change that few people even know is occurring. And you have very visible occurrences in the sky from the aircraft, a very visible sun-blocking, expanding, dingy trails that are exactly what geoengineering patents describe.
Heavy aluminum, I'm talking like in the 40s and 50s up to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. That's still common.
That's interesting, Dane. Who was that fellow speaking?
That fellow is a U.S. Forest Service biologist, 35-year service to the U.S. Forest Service, degrees as long as your arm. And Francis has measured the aquatic insect life in Northern California, for example, which has declined 90% in the last 10 years because of this massive amount of aluminum flowing through our streams at this point. So, again, I just want to state that Craig asked everybody to believe what he thinks, and I'm only asking everybody to investigate the facts. And again, when you have agencies like Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, NASA, all these other universities I named, they're all involved with geoengineering programs and research. And this can be found, again, only one place of many, on the document I sent you, Jan. I hope you could post it.
Now, there's one question I asked you last time you were on with us, and one I'm still curious about, and I'd like some greater specificity if you have it. Who exactly are the managing agencies that are giving permission for specific flights to release specific amounts of whatever it is into the atmosphere? Where are the paper trails? Where are the specific accountabilities for these whomever they are and whoever flying the plane? And do we have a specific chain of evidence that we can point to with indisputable specificity?
Well, if you're asking for a government agency to admit that they're in, their part in each of these programs, we're not going to find that. Just like we things with Agent Orange, depleted uranium, and a lot of other issues that we could go into.
Well, I'm just looking. People keep sending me videos and pictures of they say they've taken right here in Iowa of chemtrails and of particular flights, and I recorded this on this specific day, and this is over my house, and this is filling the. Well, wouldn't there be logs? Wouldn't there be people that you could ask? They say, who were those guys, and who told them to do that? I mean, this seems like this would be a difficult thing to keep under wraps for very long. Even for a good example of that is now the NSA had to admit that it's monitoring all the cell phone activity of Verizon. I mean, that was rumored 2 or 3 years ago. Now, finally, it's come out that it's actually the occasion, and it's real. We can prove it.
As far as keeping it under wraps, let's look at what happens to whistleblowers. In the case of those that blow the whistle on Wall Street, for example, the whistleblower usually ends up in jail, and all the criminals end up on their merry way. And I've personally spoken to NOAA scientists, USDA scientists, U.S. Forest Service scientists, all of whom know these programs are going on, but they're absolutely unwilling to speak out on the record for obvious reasons. You know, those who try are severely punished, and we see that with the Wall Street bit going on. And on the weather trading derivatives, and back to follow the money, and this is what people should understand, especially with farming, Jan, we have weather trading derivatives where they are making money. There is a full gaming casino on Wall Street that is ultimately backed by the weather makers to make money off of weather derivatives. This is hard science fact. So people can look this up and start to connect the money dots on this, that, you know, it's ultimately all about money and power. And again, we have other documents owning the weather.
Hang on, Dane. Dane Wigginton is concerned about the chemtrails. My in-studio guest, Craig Bergman, thinks it's not worth our time even to ponder this. He thinks it's all a big scam. And we're again discussing chemtrails, and Craig, it's your turn.
Well, thank you, Jan. He was just throwing so many things out there. It's the classic throw everything against the wall and see what it sticks. And so I should have been taking notes on here. I didn't realize he was just going to go on this kind of monologue. I thought we'd have a lot more back and forth. But nevertheless, I'll take the few minutes we have here and try to
You're
run down.
You're welcome to go back and forth if you'd like.
Well, I tried, and he was talking over me, and I didn't want to be rude. So essentially what we have is, and I have to start with where he was. First of all,
quiet, Craig. I was completely quiet in the monologue. I just simply stated facts, and the agencies involved, hard facts with hard statements of which agencies are involved with this. That's not just a monologue, is it? You wanted facts, I gave you facts.
Go ahead.
Let's take a look at them. But first, I have to go back to your first premise. I said at the top of the thing, there is a difference between weather and climate. You continue to accuse me of blurring those two while you're the one actually blurring them. So let's just set that aside. Of course, people have been trying to influence the weather. That is not what geoengineering is. That is not what these chemtrails are about. That is not what you're peddling there. And you're diffusing it on purpose.
What do you base that on? How do you know that these are not geoengineering? How do you conclusively state that? What do you base that on?
You conclusively base that on the fact that everyone knows that they're doing weather modification, that they're making it rain or not making it rain or trying to do that. And these are all the public things. Every one of these public documents and public agencies you go to is about weather modification, which is known and proven. And then you say, ergo, therefore, geoengineering. And there's no ergo, there's no therefore. But let me finish. Sir, you've had almost this half show here.
Well, I'm just confused because you said they can't modify the weather, but now you're saying they can.
I didn't say they can't modify the weather.
Go ahead.
I said they cannot change the climate of the planet, period. Next topic.
What do you base that on?
Okay, look. What we're doing here is we are debunking a theory that is impossible.
But give us some facts, Craig. I just want some facts to back up your statement.
I can sit here and do a ton of facts. You want some ton of facts?
Please.
The chemical companies on the earth produce about 5 billion tons of chemicals per year total. Every chemical on the earth is regulated and controlled by the governments on the earth. Okay? Your average aircraft, do you know how many aircraft there are in the world? Jan, do you have any idea?
No clue.
Pick a number. Just share it out there.
150,000.
Well, there's a few more than that. There's about 450,000, counting everything. Helicopters, ultralights, because they're all regulated. They all have to have tags. They all have to have permits. Everything is there. The total volume, cubical, that an aircraft can carry on average, when you add them all up and all the register things, about 2,000 cubic feet, only which of 10% is available for space. So what you would have to be talking about to have 5 billion tons of the chemicals we know. I mean, that's bleach, that's polyester, that's detergents, that's farm pesticides, that's military grade weapons, that's everything. The math, when you do this, you would require 40 million aircraft to be in the air to disperse to take care of the volume of land versus the volume of atmosphere.
Craig, where are you getting any of these figures? What is it?
They're all right there on Wiki.
What does it have to do with anything is my point. I mean, I don't understand where you're going with this. It has nothing to do with geoengineering. It has nothing to do with the payloads that KC-10s carry, KC-135s, the 20 million tons.
There aren't enough of them to make any impact. That's what I'm trying to say. The volume of the atmosphere is 300 million times the volume of the arable land on the Earth.
So I think your point is, even if they wanted to, they couldn't.
They couldn't. There's no science for it. There's no math for it. They couldn't do this. But the real thing is, Jan, and you asked it in your previous question, and I just have to hit it on here. He talked about these government agencies. Yes, they're all liberal. The Department of Agriculture, absolutely. Look what they're doing with the Farm Bill. 80% of it is welfare. Okay? So obviously they're all in on that together, and that's a real problem that we have. But here's some of the facts we just have to get out there. You have whistleblowers. We have whistleblowers on Benghazi. We have people that have given their life to whistleblow. And you tell me there's no YouTube video, not of a bunch of smoke in the sky, but there's no YouTube video of a guy hooking a hose up to a plane, guaranteeing what the thing is, popping it off, looking at the extra tanks of this, doing the volume measurement. How many airplanes would they take to have? How many chemicals? Where are they getting them from? There's no paper trail at all, Jan. There are more photos of UFOs, Bigfoot, and the Loch Ness Monster.
I don't know where you're going with this, Craig. We have video of KC-10 spraying at altitude. Anybody can look. They can see the nozzles. They can see the spray coming on and off. I mean, we have absolute
They're not what you say they are.
Pardon me?
Those are contrails. They are not chemtrails. There is no spraying. There is no substance for it. There is no volume for it.
Then I challenge people to look themselves, because contrails don't come out of spray nozzles on the back of aircraft, Craig.
Show me a real spray nozzle with a high-resolution camera.
You know what? I challenge people to look for themselves. And again, semantics are very important here. The term chemtrails leads exactly where perhaps Craig has gone. Maybe that's why he has his opinion of conspiracy theory, because that's what you find if you look up the term chemtrails. If you look up the term geoengineering, you'll find hard science.
That's why you've changed it.
Why I changed it?
Like
I never
climate
changed the term.
change.
Look, you admit in one breath, Craig, that they can, in fact, modify the weather.
Yes.
So if they modify the weather 24/7...
No, they're not modifying it 24/7.
How do you know that?
Conjecture you're adding on top of it.
There's weather modification programs going on 24/7 around the globe all year long.
No, there's not.
Oh, really?
There's research going on at universities and people taking taxpayer money for the government.
There's publicized programs going on yearly around the globe, 24 hours a day, all the time. There are published weather mod programs. So on what basis do you make the statement that they're not going on all the time? On what information are you relying, Craig? Because
I'm relying on the simple information that is publicly available that you are intentionally distorting.
I'm distorting it? So, look, I'm only asking people to investigate this, and you don't cite a single source.
I want them to investigate it, too.
Okay,
you don't cite a single source, though. You make a statement that they're not modifying the weather constantly, yet you cite no source.
Hang on, Dane. I have a question here for both of you, particularly Dane to begin with. Let's assume, for the sake of the discussion, that everything that you suspect, everything that you're worried about, is actually going on, and that you have all these political jurisdictions, nameless, faceless, and otherwise.
Well, they're not nameless and faceless, though. I mean, we have DOD, DOE,
okay,
Department of Ag.
Let's just assume all that's true.
It's on the record, though, Jan. It truly is on the record.
Assuming that it's true, what's the worst that can happen? Are you saying that they're doing it and messing up? Or they're doing it and then they're in the process of trying to do something they think is the right thing. They're doing a lot of unintended damage that the rest of us are paying for. What's the worst that can happen if your theory is correct, Dan?
Well, let's ask the people of Oklahoma, of Moore, Oklahoma, how they think the weather is down their way. And, the weather disasters are increasing radically around the globe.
But, Dane, that's been called a tornado belt for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, see, he's talking weather
Hold on,
again,
that was the strongest tornado ever recorded in many aspects. It broke many records. we're seeing weather disasters increasing radically around the globe. There is no science to dispute this fact. We have articles, for example, in Time magazine on the weather. Who profits from this? That's what many people ask too.
So the answer to the question then is they're doing it and they're messing up. Does
anybody disagree that there are more weather disasters around the globe than historical norms? Much more. I don't think you can find anything credible.
Well, I will totally disagree with that because we don't have any history recorded except for the last couple hundred years.
Craig, but in that couple hundred years, we have a radical increase in weather disasters.
We have a radical increase in record keeping and more information available.
Well, that just doesn't hold water, Craig. You find a single scientific agency that doesn't say weather-related disasters.
You find a single one that isn't profiting from saying the other.
If you look at the law.
Hang on, Dane. I got to take a break. This is our last time out together. Right now, though, we're talking about the stuff in the sky. Dane Wigginton says it's something to be concerned about. He's a website called GeoengineeringWatch.org. I was having a conversation off the air just a second ago with Craig Berman, Dane, and we were discussing what we think your end game is, and I speculated. All right, you say this stuff is real. They're messing up. They're screwing up, and the end game is knock it off. Don't do that. It's pretty simple. If it hurts when it does that, don't do that anymore. And Craig disagreed with me. He said, you haven't heard him say not to do it. What is your goal?
If there's some confusion about that, that is and always has been my only goal. Anybody who reads anything I've ever written, ever posted on our site, that is absolutely the only goal. Nobody should play God with the weather.
Including weather, cloud seeding, or...
Yeah, there he goes again, weather.
Nobody, weather or climate. Nobody should play God with either one. When you make it rain in one place, you obviously take the rain from somewhere else. Craig talks about how wet it is there, therefore none of this could be going on. It's damn dry out here, Craig. It's record dry all across the West.
Well, I have a practical solution for that. Let's stick a straw in the Mississippi River and put the water out in Oklahoma and Texas and Colorado where they need it. We should have done that 50 years ago. But
Craig,
it's nothing to do with spraying in the sky.
You can't change the lack of rain. The forests are dying everywhere in the West. And look, this is all I want. This is all I want, for people to legitimately investigate geoengineering. It's hard science. Again, and those making money off this, I'm reading off Time magazine right now, how Wall Street profits from weird weather. I'm quoting, when Mother Nature is controlled, brokerages, it creates, quote, big profits for banks, brokerages, and insurance firms. This is about money. It's about control. If you're part of Agenda 21, you should know that too, Craig. But I just want people to investigate, Jan. Geoengineering.
Real quick question, in fact, just a theoretical question. Now, you said you're having a terrible drought where you are, and obviously you are.
Horrific.
If you could use a weather modification to steer water your way, you'd say you would forego that? You wouldn't do it?
No, because as soon as you mess with the system, we already see the results of trying to do what they're doing. If people read the document I sent to you, Jan, 80 pages long, that is their stated goal, to control the weather, take rain.
But that was 60 years ago, Dane.
Hey, there's documentation as of January 2nd of this year.
Okay.
Global governance on geoengineering. I'm not saying that's the only document. I'm saying that's how far back it goes. We have congressional documents, 40 pages long, which I will mail to you after the show, outlining global geoengineering governance as of right now, 2013.
Hang on. Let's take a call from Greg. Good morning, Greg. What do you think?
Well, Jen, I need a scorecard for both of them. To know what they're for and against. I believe the guy on the newsmaker line makes the most sense. I would like to address Craig.
Real fast.
Okay. Point. I am a conservative, and I believe in the gentleman that's calling in on the line because I've actually seen contrails come on and come off, and I live in West Des Moines. You've called people who believe in that flaming liberals and etc. I'm a conservative, sir, and I'm not a wingnut, nor am I unintelligent. And I don't know what your credentials are, but in regards to Agenda 21, if you believe in that, why don't you move over to
I apologize if you got the idea that he's in favor of it. His movie on documentary on Agenda 21 is expressly a critique of it. Thank you, Greg. Dane, thank you so much. It's always frustrating when the time evaporates so quickly, but I'll just send people to GeoengineeringWatch.org.
That's all I hope.
All right.
That's all I want.
Thank you so much. And Craig Behrman, thank you for your spirited conversation as well, sir.
You're welcome, Jan.
Coming up shortly, we're going to talk with Dr. Merrill Matthews.